We know and love him. He's been coming to Launchpad meetings for a long time. Myles Wallace of peakperformers.org is going to be talking about small mistakes, big whoops. He works for Peak Performers, a nonprofit staffing firm that's been in business since 1994. They staff state of Texas government agencies with office professional, accounting, and IT roles. As a nonprofit, they give job hiring priority to people with disabilities and chronic medical conditions. He looks at his work as changing the world one job at a time. He works in strategic partnerships for Peak and has a background in B2B sales, recruiting, digital marketing. He's proud to call Austin home, and outside of work enjoys hobby board games, bike riding, and swimming with his brand new spouse. Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right, Myles Wallace.
I appreciate that introduction, Kathy, and it is good to see everybody. And you know, it's kind of funny going back to what Kathy mentioned as like my last personal interest. The inspiration for this talk actually came a couple of weeks ago. So me and my wife are very active swimmers during the summertime, and we had just gotten done with a 500 meter, and we finished up at the pool, and we're panting and everything, and we're kind of just catching our breath and stuff. And my wife, Marissa, turns to me and she says, Myles, I just noticed the weirdest thing. You know, I've been swimming now for decades, and yet for some reason, I'm holding my breath while I do the backstroke. And I thought about it for a second, and I'm like, you know what? I do that as well. I do that same thing. And it's really weird. My face is sticking up out of the air. And so the inspiration for that really kind of came to this particular presentation is, hey, here are some of the mistakes that I see job seekers of all levels make. Because even if you've been swimming for a long time, you're always going to be working on your breath. And if you are a job seeker for a long time, these are some of the different things that I see people, yes, if you're more of a junior level job seeker, you're going to be making these mistakes a lot. But I also see really, really experienced job seekers make all the time. So as Kathy mentioned, these are the small mistakes that job seekers make, but the big whoops, they have big complications. And so our agenda today is, first off, I'm going to be talking very briefly about who Peak Performers is, just so you know who we are. And then I'm going to be breaking this down into three kind of primary sections. These are going to be personal marketing whoops that people make. These are going to be communication whoops that people make. And then these are going to be interview whoops. And then also, just to kind of keep you all engaged, actually, I'm going to be working with Shannon, and we're going to be kind of doing a bit of a running poll, if I understand that right. Right, Shannon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so, and the idea with this poll is I want each and every one of you to score 100%. And if you're not 100%, just some things to think about, you know, some things to take away from this presentation and kind of go into the next week for as you're doing job seeking. Real quick, who is Peak Performers? Well, who am I? My name is Myles, and been with Peak for the last 4 years. And I kind of do a combination of business development, which also recruiting and also community outreach. And I'm the one here to kind of represent Peak Performers to all of our community partnerships. And as Kathy mentioned, most of our customers are large state government agencies, although that is rapidly changing. We are in the process of actually staffing for multiple other nonprofit organizations as well as for-profit organizations too. And as Kathy mentioned, we have a very unique kind of nonprofit mission that a lot of people, it may be completely weird to them. We are one of only a handful of nonprofit staffing firms in the entire country. And what we do is we give job hiring priority to people with disabilities and chronic medical conditions. Before you automatically say, hey, that's not me, I'll stop you right there, Myles. I'm going to kind of explain a little bit more. Disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is how we define it, is anything physical, mental, or emotional, or perceived disability about a person. So it could be something really visible and obvious, such as I'm missing an arm, or I might be in a wheelchair, or I might be blind, or it could be totally invisible about a person, such as ADHD or dyslexia, or PTSD, sleep apnea, depression, diabetes, like high anxiety disorder, as well as like hypertension. All of these are examples of qualifying conditions. And when I'm not talking to you using these guys, I'm usually talking to you through a pair of hearing aids. So if you have any questions about that, I definitely encourage you to reach out to me. The other thing that I get a lot of questions about is people oftentimes assume that, hey, since my disability is handled, I'm taking the right insert medications or therapy or physical therapy, whatever the case happens to be, I can fully work an 8 to 5 normal workday, you're still eligible to be a priority job seeker and on for peak performers. And currently 75% of our workforce has a qualifying ADA condition. Now, real quick, I'm going to drop my contact information into the chat at the end, and you'll also see it running along the bottom too. But just so you can browse our jobs for the future, what you can do is you go to peakperformers.org, click on Browse Jobs, and what it's going to do is it's going to pull up a list of all the various different jobs that we have open at that time, including things like, hey, what's the pay rate? What's the work location for that, or is it remote? And also it's going to talk about the minimum qualifications for each individual job. Some of the top roles that I'm recruiting for today are things like purchasers, contract specialists, administrative assistants, auditors, and even a project management specialist. I know there's a lot of project management types here at Launchpad, so I definitely encourage you to kind of check that one out and see if it might be a fit for me. And here's the thing too. I try to be approachable. I try to make myself available to all the job seekers out there that might be able to utilize me. So if you email me your resume, I'll pick up the phone and give you a call, and we'll have a conversation about where you might be able to fit in with peak performers either now or in the future. All right, so now moving on to the topic at hand today. And the topic at hand is, whoops, these small mistakes that have big consequences. And here's why they have big consequences. What you have to realize is that recruiting and HR is a very fast-paced role, and people make decisions in this lickety split of a moment. So you don't have very long to make an impression on them. So the first thing that I would kind of point out is why this matters. So the reality of it is that even in today's job market, where there are currently a lot of jobs that are available and relatively less job seekers than there are jobs, the fact of the matter is that many of the people in this group call right now are going up for very competitive kinds of roles, and the odds are that your resume is somewhere in a stack of resumes. And I was having a conversation with my father-in-law, who is a retired chief financial officer who used to do interviews pretty regularly. And I'm like, hey, Ed, am I just jaded about this? Because it seems to me like, as a recruiter, I make decisions pretty quickly. I go through and, most recruiters will spend 6 to 10 seconds on a resume. I feel like I spend a little bit more time, but it's not that much more time than that. And before I could even say anything, his wife pipes up right next to him and says, oh, I remember Ed bringing home stacks of resumes. And what he would do is he would sit at the kitchen table at 7 o'clock at night and he would go, no, no, no. And so I asked him, Ed, how long does it take you to make a decision about a job seeker? And he said, not really long at all. It only takes a moment. So you only have a moment to really make an impression on people. And so a lot of these different things are ways to make sure that you make that positive impression and you can continue that positive momentum going through the entire course of your engagement with that particular employer. So having said that, let's jump right in and talk about the first kind of category of mistakes that I see, and that is around the topic of personal marketing. Personal marketing, what is that? Well, here's the very first thing that I would throw out there is that there's an awful darn lot of resumes that I read every single day, and it is not immediately obvious to me what it is that person does. I look at the resume and I just don't know. Like, I have to read into the resume. I have to look through the experience. I have to kind of extrapolate that and stuff. And you can't expect the recruiters or for that matter, the hiring managers or anybody within that company to really spend that much time thinking about it. So what I'd encourage you to do, many of you might have a resume that would look like mine. So I work in business development, I work in recruiting, I work in online marketing, I work in representation for peak performers. And so it's a bit of an identity crisis. If I were to apply for a job tomorrow, which one do I put? Well, the reality of it is I generate 3 different resumes for that. You want to put one thing. If you are applying for an accountant job, then I want you to put at the top of your resume that you are an accountant. It's that simple. Look at it another way. Let's say, for example, I am shopping for a bag of chips and I'm going down the chip aisle. The first and foremost thing that I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to be looking for a bag that is clearly labeled chips. From there, I'll pick up a couple of different bags and I'll look at them and I'll look at the back and I'll read the ingredients and I'll say, well, do I want barbecue, or do I want ones with sea salt, or do I want ones with low sodium? Or perhaps I want sour cream and onions just to mix it up a little bit, right? You have to be able to get the recruiters to pick up the bag of chips, which is you, in the very first place. So very clearly label yourself so that they know, okay, Myles is an accountant and I'm looking for an accountant. Here's the second thing that I like to throw out, is that you are just not qualified. And this is not necessarily targeted at anyone in particular, but I feel like all job seekers make this mistake pretty often. I'd encourage you, the next time that you click apply for a job, I want you to really, really look at the minimum qualifications for the role and think about it and think, hey, do I have everything? Now, this just illustrates it from our side of the recruiting standpoint. Recently, we were filling a job where we were seeking out 40 administrative assistants for Texas Workforce Commission. And we just kind of posted it out there online, and we had a bunch of people apply. In fact, we had a total of 627 applicants. And as you can see, 2/3 of them did not meet the minimum qualifications and criteria. And so we immediately screened them out. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but the reality of it is that first and foremost, you want to make sure that you respect your time, because your time is valuable. You want to apply for jobs that you have a decent shot at getting. I personally am a big advocate for quality over quantity. And here's the second reason too, is that we get this pretty regularly, where we have a job seeker that literally goes and applies for every single job that we have posted on our job board. And what happens there is that most likely we are probably going to screen them out, and we're not going to consider them any further, because we're like, well, are you paying attention to what you're doing? How can we really trust you on a job? So I'd encourage you to really think about that and make sure that you are meeting the minimum qualifications. There are some differences. For example, in the public sector, this is super important. It must be followed every single time. In the private sector, sometimes it's a little bit more loosey-goosey, but I'd still encourage you to think about that and really think, hey, do I at least have most, like 99%, 95%? Maybe if I have somebody on the inside that I know that can personally vouch for me in the organization, they'll consider me anyway. But for the most part, look for jobs that you meet the minimum qualifications on. And here's another one that I'll go ahead and throw out there too, is that there's a lot of job seekers out there that just fail to update their resume, their cover letter, their email, pretty much anything before sending. And I see people just make a lot of mistakes, where sometimes it'll literally say insert name in the body of the email, or sometimes it'll be a different person's name, or sometimes it'll be a different company. We see it all. And guess what? These may not seem like a big deal. After all, yeah, I get it. You're applying for tons of different roles, but at the same time, it matters. It matters to us. And so therefore, it should matter to you. I would go so far as to say that at least half the time when people email me out of the blue, they misspell my name. 50%. 50%, that's a lot of people. And there's no better way to make a really, really good connection with a person by starting off with just knowing their name and being able to address it respectfully as well too. I would say that, hey, if you're going into an interview and somebody has a name that's unusual to you, or you're not sure how to pronounce, look it up on YouTube. It'll walk you through, or at the very least, ask for clarification and don't just hazard a guess on it. Now, here's the other thing that kind of that I run into pretty frequently, and that is an incomplete LinkedIn profile right here. So this is what we see on the other side when you have not completed your LinkedIn profile. We just see kind of a little gray silhouette, and the odds are we have no idea if you are really looking for a job, or even if you're a real person, or if you're just a bot. We have no idea. I know this sounds basic, but I really want you to take some time to just very, very basically complete your LinkedIn profile. I know that Launchpad actually has several different classes on how to complete your LinkedIn profile and really make it visible and really make it strong. But for starters, if you need something that'll take you 10 minutes to do, here's the 4 steps that you can do just to make sure that your LinkedIn profile at least kind of reflects you semi-well. Number 1, add a picture. And I would venture that you should probably put the tag hashtag open to work on it so that it kind of shows up right from your picture and we know immediately that you're available to work. Number two, I'd encourage you to add a headline that describes what it is that you do, so that I know, again, matching up that chip analogy and stuff, am I looking for the right bag of chips? Then I would say that you want to make sure that you add a professional summary in the about section right there, because that is something that pops up when we're kind of scrolling through very quickly and we can see, hey, is this person have the right kinds of skills generally for what I'm looking for? Okay, so just pop that in there real quickly. And then the final thing too is that copy paste the experience from your resume into the experience section on LinkedIn. The majority of the time, when I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile and I look through experience, I have no idea what they actually did outside of their job title. And it's not that hard. Simply copy paste from your resume and you can stick it right in there. Think of LinkedIn as your living resume. But wait, I told you there was 4 steps, but there is a 5th step if you really want to go above and beyond. And that is you can add your resume to your LinkedIn profile for bonus points. This one gets 2 big thumbs up for me. Now, everybody's going to be comfortable with a different level of exposure in this regard, so take that with a grain of salt, but this is something that I personally would recommend. It just makes it that much easier for the recruiters to find you and then contact you, and to be able to read in depth to see what you've done. Now, while we're on the topic of social media, this isn't something that we've addressed too much, but I would like to kind of throw out there that your social media impact is important. So ask Kathy, ask Shannon about this, but social media is incredibly important. So it's estimated that 7 in 10 employers do some kind of a social media screen on you before they hire you. So just make sure that you're representing yourself really, really well. I want to kind of pause right there. And Kathy, on the topic of kind of personal marketing, do you see any other things that job seekers kind of make the mistake of pretty frequently?
Hmm. Uh, I hope I'm not repeating something that you've already said. I had a person come to the door while you were talking, but the business of photographs. Did you talk about the photo on LinkedIn at all?
Yeah, I said that I recommend having a photograph so that people know you're a real human. And I
Okay,
personally
no, that's
recommend.
that's absolutely right. And these days you don't have to have a professional photo done, but because phone cameras are just so good. But it needs to be one of just you, of your face, of smiling. They even say that if you smile with teeth, that you score a little bit higher. Uh, but but yeah, something that's very friendly and approachable. We also recommend that you have a background picture because it's a way that you can uh, fortify your brand, and
Yeah,
not just a pretty picture, but of flowers and that sort of thing, but something that really, what do you want to stand out? How, what is it that you're offering? And if you can find a background picture that speaks to that, we think it helps you in your
absolutely.
personal marketing.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And sometimes it's just putting subtle kinds of things and stuff. Let's say you are a Java developer, go search for a stock photo of like code or something like that and put that on. And then immediately when the recruiter finds your resume, they immediately know that you're a technical candidate, right? Don't make us have to read too far into it. So yeah, thank you, Kathy. Well, cool. And I'm going to go right into the communication whoops that I see people make every single day. Now, I know it sounds basic, but I'd like for each one of you after today, I'd like for you to go in and just double check and make sure that your email address is spelled correctly. I don't think that I really have to say too much about it besides that, but this happens more often than you would think. Then we go in, we look at the resume, and then we send out an email to invite them to interview or invite them to schedule some time to chat with us further, and the email bounces. Just double check that. Just make sure that it is on there and that it is correctly. In fact, you may want to kind of just right click it and just make sure that the mail to link is correct as well too, especially if you're copying pasting from a template. Let's talk about the phones. Let's talk about phones. Now, I want you to actually put in the chat right here on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning I hate it, 10 meaning I love it. I want you to put just how much you enjoy getting phone calls and how much you enjoy talking on the phone. I'll wait. I'll give everybody a second right there. Feel free to kind of espouse it in kind of this safe environment and stuff right here. Just kind of how you feel about phone calls. I understand. My wife is very much the way that she almost never picks up the phone, and she really, really despises kind of using the phone. But the fact of the matter is that if you are a job seeker, there's not really a whole lot of choice in the matter. I see job seekers making the mistake pretty frequently where they just do not put their phone number on their resume for fear of, like, you know, it getting out there into the world. And so they expect the recruiters to email them and to be able to request a specific interview time. Guess what? It probably ain't going to happen. You just want to make sure that you do put that out there. But while we're also on the topic of talking about phones, let's talk about this voicemail thing. Let's just talk about it. And I would encourage each of you right now to think about and look at your phone and just be able to say, hey, do I have a professional voicemail greeting that's set up right now? Furthermore, do I have my ringer off so that if I get a phone call from an unsolicited number, then I could potentially pick it up? Because you never know, it might be a recruiter. They might be calling down a list of people because they have a job that they need to start, you know, in a week from now, and they have very little time. But I also want you to say that each one of you should really think about making sure that the very basics are covered right here, that you do have a voicemail set up, you have a greeting recorded, and ideally that greeting says your name and your phone number. That way we know that we got the right person when we called. Here's another thing that kind of pops up from a communication standpoint is that you are just hard to schedule. And I get it. We have life going on. We have things that we are doing. We're busy people. But that said, this is the opportunity for you to find your next career move. So figure out how to make it work would be my best advice to each of you. The reality of it is that you can probably, if you are very well qualified for the job and the recruiter is having a hard time, odds are they probably will go back and forth with you a couple of times to try to figure out a particular time to schedule you. But you can't expect them to do that. They're probably not going to do that. So my best advice is make yourself as available as possible. And if you do have conflicts or you are very difficult to schedule, the advice that I would give to you is reply back with specific times to be able to say, hey, I'm sorry that I'm having a little trouble scheduling with you. I really look forward to chatting with you. I'm available Monday from 11 to noon and also Tuesday from 2 to 4, whatever the case happens to be. List out a couple of specific times and say, does any of these work for you? Make sure that you don't get lost in that back and forth communication with the recruiter. And then here's another big one. You just don't follow up. And this is something that it's very easy to just assume that, you know, this is something that I work on. I feel like I have very good follow-up with every single person that I have an interaction with, but I do miss stuff. We all do. But I want you to really think about that from and the impact it may be having on your career. Because I would say that of all the phone calls that I make from people that email me their resume, so these are people that have already reached out to me, they've sent me their contact information and they've sent me their credentials, and I call them, and a third of the time I just never hear back. I'm not sure what to do about that, you know? So make sure that you are following up with everybody. And then take it to the next step too. Do you get to that interview and they say, hey, you know, you seem like a really, really good quality candidate. I'm excited to work with you. Now, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you complete a skills aptitude test. Make sure that you follow up with them. Make sure that you are doing everything that you said you were going to do. Or if you said during the interview, hey, you know, I can get you a couple of references by this date, make sure that you do it. Follow-up is incredibly important. I want to kind of pause there. Kathy, do you see anything else that people make as far as like communication blunders that might be inhibiting their job search process?
No, all of those are great. As somebody who is a terrible communicator, we encourage people to create a unique, in fact, I'd love to hear your take on this. We encourage people to create a unique email address for their job search so that their their recruiter emails do not get mixed up with their political emails, their personal emails, their junk email, that you always keep up to date. You check multiple times a day. You put alerts on your computer or your phone whenever you get emails to that email address. And if you have a unique address for your job search, that's the one you put on resumes and applications, and contact me on LinkedIn through this email address, et cetera. And it should have your name in it, and it should be a Gmail account. And and you check it all the time. I miss emails. I've got 6 email accounts, and I miss emails all the time because I just don't have the bandwidth to check them periodically. But if I were looking for a job, all that would change, and I would give top priority to my email account, and the business of following up, even transparently. You want recruiters to be transparent with you about, we're still interviewing, we're moving on to the next step at this point, to let you know what's going on. And you should be the same. If you, this business of explaining to them and communicating with them. And I know I promised you I would have these names by this time, but I have not been able to confirm. So I'm still working on that. I'll keep you posted on when I'll be able to have those contacts or something, so that it's almost like a test of how responsive are you. If we give you an assignment and a job, are you going to keep us apprised of what's going on? Are you on top of things? Are you a good communicator?
Yeah, it's a very real struggle. Like it really is. And we have so many people, kind of as you saw with that graph from earlier, we just have so many people that just drop off the process, that just never complete, all the things that they said that they were going to do, or just never call us back too. So, and it's such a, it's such an easy thing to do. I would add to the whole email thing. It's great to have a job hunting specific email, because one of the best things that you can do in that particular case is that let's say you find your dream job. Guess what? Your resume might still be floating around there in different databases and stuff like that. But what you could do is you could just set up an auto emailer on it and just that just says, hey, thanks so much for contacting me. I'm not currently looking for work right now. I'll let you know if that ever changes. Something just as basic as that. And then you don't even have to think about the follow up and follow through with something like that. So yeah, thank you, Kathy. All right, are we ready for number 3? Are we ready for number 3? We've made it to the interview, and here are the biggest interview whoops that I see people make on a pretty consistent basis. Number 1, you gotta show up. Now, I know this sounds really basic, and I have pretty strong feelings that most of the people that are in this call are going to show up for an interview that's important to them. But that said, I think that it still bears worth repeating, because we see people of all different skill levels that will not show up for the interview for a variety of different reasons. Maybe they forgot, or maybe they did find their dream job and they just decided to ghost us. Make sure that you're professional about it. Make sure that you keep your commitments. And if you are not able to make that interview, let's say you did get your dream job, I want you to remember that about 20% of all jobs fall through between the time that you get a job offer, between the time that you actually start. So you're not there. Kind of like Kathy was saying that, hey, you're not fully employed till you get your second paycheck. I like to say you're not really employed until your butt cheeks are in the chair and that you are physically in the office signing the I-9 paperwork. You need to make sure that you kind of go through. So one of the best ways to do that is just make sure that you don't burn any bridges and that you kind of follow up. Because guess what? The odds are that you may be looking for a job maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 years later, whatever the case happens to be, but employers have records of all those times, and there's nothing a bigger red flag than what's called a no call, no show. It's just one of those cases where we're probably just not going to consider you again. Now, here's another one that just drives me absolutely crazy, because I'm talking to you through hearing aids right now, and I have severe high-frequency hearing loss. It makes it very difficult to hear people, especially if they're trying to spell out consonants or, it's just a variety of different conditions. And I find that a lot of job seekers will mistakenly take the call when there is a bad connection or it's a noisy background, or maybe they're talking to me through their Bluetooth headset that doesn't always 100% work, or maybe gets a little crackly. So I want you to be honest with yourself about that. First off, I'd encourage you to go and like call your mom, maybe call and talk to your best friend and say, hey, how easy is it to understand me over the phone? Is it pretty easy? I just want you to double check that and make sure so that the employer isn't having any trouble. Because I can tell you from personal experience, it's really hard to interview you when I can only hear every other word that you're saying. Um, and here's the other thing too, is that if you find yourself in a situation where you are out grocery shopping and you get the call for your dream job, what I'd encourage you to do, I know you're excited, I know you want to talk to the person, but tell them, hey, you caught me at a bad time. I'm grocery shopping right now. Can I call you back in 10 minutes once I have a chance to get back to the car? That way it's nice and quiet. They're always going to say yes because they want to talk to you. Don't try to brave through it and don't try to kind of shout over the noise. Here's another one, especially in the age of COVID, when we're all doing video interviews and things like that, it's still a pretty consistent problem that the technology is just not working for whatever reason. And this could be a variety of different things. Maybe it's your video. Guess what? Guess how awkward it is when you go into a video interview with somebody and for whatever reason, they don't share their video. It's a little strange, a little odd. I'm talking to a black screen at that point. It gets a little weird. But if they don't have the microphone working, it's even more problematic. So before you do an interview, just make sure that you do a quick double check. Just make sure that your technology works. I consistently have challenges with Microsoft Teams. So what I usually do is I usually do a test run on Microsoft Teams where I just try calling somebody and making sure that the platform works for me. Here's another one. I want you to put in the chat right there. I want you to say just how fun it is to be job seeking, right? It's not. It's not. It's hard. It's really hard. When you are going through your job search process, it is very emotionally draining. Also, it drains your self-esteem as well as your wallet too. It's very difficult to be positive throughout the course of this, but it's absolutely imperative that you are positive throughout the course of your entire job search, all the way through your initial phone calls with the recruiters to how you wake up and get out of bed every morning with excitement and energy, all the way to the point where you do your interviews. There are just so many people that I encounter that I can tell the weight of the job search is weighing them down. So do whatever it is you need to do to get in a happy place, because that's really important. And then furthermore, I would say that I want you to think about the last job interview that you did. And I want you to ask, did I smile? How much did I smile? I want to make sure I smiled, right? Smiling is incredibly important. And I know this thing sounds kind of basic, but I would say watch yourself in the mirror and practice smiling before your job interview. And it's going to go so much better for you. Here's another one. Answer the question, or rather all of the questions. It happens pretty often that I'm going to be exchanging emails with a particular job seeker. I've just finished talking with them on the phone and I'm super excited about them. And all of a sudden I send them this, this paragraph or like a couple of different questions that I have, and I get a one-word response. Okay, or maybe they just don't follow up with me, or maybe I'm in the course of an interview and I ask them a question and they try to dodge my question, or I can't quite tell what they're doing. So you want to make sure that you are answering the question. It's kind of like one of those things where if you are taking a test back in school, some points is better than no points. So it's always better to answer the question somewhat as opposed to get a 0 in that particular category. And then this is kind of my final bit of wisdom that I would share with each of you, is that it's something that I see pretty consistently. This is with, job seekers that are very seasoned, as well as people that are brand new to the job search. And that is that they just share too much. You have to know when to stop talking. The reality of it is that from an HR perspective, from a recruiting perspective, there are certain boundaries that we want to have established for your protection protection and for our legal protection too. So we don't want to know things like family status. We don't want to know your current financial status. We don't want to know where you're living, any of these things. We don't want to know your political views. Any of those things would count as too much information. So I want you to think about, how can I make my responses as neutral as possible? How can I answer the questions? And how can I make sure that I check all the boxes that I need to check to make it to the next level without exposing myself to the risk of sharing too much information? Okay, everybody. So now I want you to answer these questions that Shannon is going to be putting up as a poll. And I would encourage you to really think about, hey, am I scoring 100%? All right, so what's the first one that we have? The last 5 emails I sent to recruiting/hiring managers spelled their name correctly. True or false? True or false, right? I want you to think about that. Terry says true. Good, good. All right. Lydia says true with exclamation points. Love it. That's good. Great, guys. All right, Shannon, what's the next one that we have for everybody?
It is, my resume clearly labels what my occupation is.
My resume clearly labels, as in I have a label right there at the top, so I know what it is you do. If you're an accountant, does it say accountant at the top? If you're a business analyst, does it say business analyst at the top? It's important. Cool. I'm seeing a little bit less energy on this one, but that's okay. I'll still take it. I'll still take it. Shannon, what's the next question that we have for everybody?
The last 3 jobs I applied for, I met all the minimum qualifications.
And this might be something to definitely kind of look at and really kind of go back through some of the different jobs that you recently applied for and say, hey, did I meet all the minimum qualifications? Just kind of look at it. Just kind of think about that. Yeah. Randy says 95%. Okay. All right. Cool. All right, Shannon, what's the next question we got for everybody?
My LinkedIn profile has a picture and clearly marks me as available to work.
Okay. All right.
Let me talk to you about that one, Myles.
Yeah.
You may have covered that already, and I missed it somehow. So when you go in and it says open to, and then open to hiring or open to work, and then do you want to show this to recruiters, or do you want to show that you're open to work to everybody? And if you say I want to show it to all LinkedIn users, then you get the frame around your face that says open to work. And I know LinkedIn started that at the beginning of the pandemic just to help people clearly communicate that to recruiters. Some people feel that that frame makes them seem too desperate. And if you choose the other open to work, which is I only want this message to go to recruiters, you do not get the frame, but recruiters know that you're open to work. Is that just as good?
Personally, I feel that you should make it as abundantly clear to everybody who is potentially looking at your profile as possible. And so that means not only recruiters and hiring managers, but also think about the fact that you may have friends or you may have former colleagues that are browsing through LinkedIn and they look and they see a picture of you and they say, see that it shows open to work. Guess what? They worked with you previously. Odds are maybe they're going to consider you and talk with their hiring manager about the fact that you are looking for work. So personally, I'm a bigger fan of broadcasting it. I think that where some of that feedback comes from is that for like executive level searches, maybe like director level searches and stuff, maybe sometimes that is applicable where you don't want to quote unquote seem desperate. But personally, I'm a big fan of just making it super clear to the world that, hey, I'm ready to work. I am happy to be employed by.
Okay.
I'm happy to be employed.
All right. Thank you very much for that. It makes sense.
All right, Shannon, what's the next question?
My phone and email are correct on my resume.
Cool. I hope that we get true on everything here. I should add that I include my phone and my email on it. I would encourage each of you, if you had to stop and think about that for a second, just double check your resume, make absolutely 100% sure. Make 100% sure. What's the next one, Shannon?
My voicemail is set up, has a greeting, and is not full.
Okay, I see a couple of trues, a couple of yeses. I'm curious to see what more people said. I see Karen recently made the switch to setting it up. Good, cool. Yeah, Charlie says to make sure to delete your deleted voicemails. Yes, 100%. That's one of those things that can sneak up on you pretty quickly. Cool. Shannon, what's the next one?
The last
What is
phone
that?
call-
Let me ask you that.
Yeah.
So be sure to delete your deleted voicemail. So if you've already deleted your voicemails, are they not really deleted?
No, they actually
they
go
drop-
into they go into a separate folder that's called deleted messages, and you actually have to go in there in order to free up room in your voicemail box.
Get out. Okay.
Yeah, I just found that out the hard way.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you have an iPhone, just scroll to the bottom and look for deleted messages, and it'll have a list of all of them. And there will be a button in the upper right-hand corner that just says clear all. So make sure
Okay.
you do that.
I don't have an iPhone, but good to know.
Doug asks, why is this important? To answer your question, Doug, recruiting in HR is such a phone-based business that we want to know that we're getting the right person on the phone. And oftentimes, if a recruiter doesn't hear your name, and they might not even leave a voicemail. So you just want to make sure that you're ready for opportunities there. I think Doug was trying to talk there for a second, but didn't catch him. Okay, cool. Shannon, what's the next one we got here?
Sure. The last phone call I took, I could
question.
clearly hear them and they could clearly hear me.
I hear trues, I hear yeses. Trues, excellent. Good. Just again, double check. Just I want you to call your mom. I want you to call your best friend and just ask them, say, hey, am I usually pretty easy to hear on the phone? Just make sure that you do that for yourself before your next interview. Well, cool. Thank you. I want to open it up to any kind of further questions, comments, stuff that people may disagree with me on. I'm always welcome to that as well, too.
Hey, Myles, this is Charlie. Just wanted to get your guys' input on this. I've been given some advice that, I should try and remain as active as possible on LinkedIn in order to improve the algorithms that work the magic there. And things like commenting and liking and sharing articles and whatnot really helps. But I think one thing to call out is, just like in an interview, you never want to say anything negative about your previous employer. We also have to be mindful about the things that we're liking and sharing on LinkedIn, especially since there's a lot of negative comments on there, be it a meme or whatever, about poor management or poor employers. I think we have to be mindful of, not liking and sharing that kind of stuff, because if somebody is looking at our LinkedIn profile and they see our activity on LinkedIn, it could give off the aura that we're, not really in a good mindset.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. You want to make sure that you are presenting that good mindset, but also you want to make sure that you're as apolitical as possible, because, I encounter this all the time where people might overshare, but then I also encounter it to where people might voice particular opinions that politically are one way or the other. And you just never know with the individual recruiter, the individual hiring manager, or the company culture. Like, that may be a big turnoff for them too. So yeah, I'd say just don't shoot yourself in the foot. Just make sure that you kind of run it through the filter of like, hey, how would this appear to XYZ person? Any other questions, comments?
This is Karen Schwinden, and I had a comment about that open to work. I read an article, and I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it was talking about how it sounded like a no-brainer to me. If you're employed and you're looking, don't do it.
Yeah.
But they
yeah.
said, even if you, don't do it to everyone, but even if you do it to recruiters, that although LinkedIn evidently can block it for your current company, I think originally they couldn't, but it sounded like they can now. But the article said that they have been told by recruiters that you have a recruiter inside of a company, or you have an HR person inside of a company, they reach out to a recruiter, staffing firm or whatever, and say, hey, can you tell me who's looking for a job at my company? And, so I'm just given that as, I did read it, and this,
Yeah.
it sounded like what this person, it wasn't just somebody blogging. It sounded, I think that this person had a background in HR. So, and I had wondered that periodically. I mean, it was like there were times I was tempted to start looking for work, and I know that, I just knew some of the company culture, and I thought, man, if my company finds out and they have a layoff, I will be one of the first ones they let go, because they don't want people who were unhappy.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up. I think that advice is really, really strong for somebody that is currently without a job. I think that it might be a little bit different if you are currently fully employed. So yeah, thank you for the call out there and clarification. Appreciate that.